It's all top shelf stuff. Top shelf. Uh, Steve said that. I didn't say that. Okay. All right. So, do I need any announcements we need to make tonight? Prayer requests? Yes, ma'am. Broke his wrist. Ooh, yuck. Victor. Okay. Till he gets to see a doctor and get it taken care of. Okay. So Victor fell while skateboarding on campus and broke his wrist. Um, and and 12 girls walked him over. Here, let me help you, Victor. That's right. Um, who is this fine-looking young man? Right. That's what they were thinking. And he's such a straight A type of student too. So, anything else that we should mention tonight? No. Um. Oh yes. Okay. Okay. All right. We'll do that. And where's the Woods here tonight? How's their son, David? Any? I don't see the Woods. Okay. Okay. All right. So they're down with him down in Fort Myers, trying to help the family out. Yes, sir. Yeah, Robin Kinsey, exactly. I forgot about that. She is it today, tomorrow that she's today. Okay, was having the next treatment, and each one gets stepped up or more severe. I guess each time the treatment itself can be more severe. Um, and I don't know how many of you all know, but Randy McBride, he has stage 4 prostate cancer, and this is I think the fourth time he's dealt with this. And so be sure to keep Randy in your thoughts and prayers, if you would. And uh, next week, you'll have a guest teacher. I'm going to be at home helping Melissa. She has surgery next Tuesday and has a knee replacement surgery next Tuesday. So, so how about some good news? Anybody got some good news to share today? Yes, ma'am. Mickey. Oh, okay, good, good. Mickey's dad went home, doing better, apparently, obviously, maybe. Breathing's pretty important, but he went home. Okay, all right. Anybody else? Mike. Yes, they are. One here and one in Alaska. That's why he's here and Julie's in Alaska. Yeah, they're both due about the same time. And Julie expects to be down here in another week or so as well. A couple of weeks, right around the first part of December. Yes, sir, Mr. Yancey. Okay. All right. That's good news. Mike Reed's still in some pain and discomfort, but he is doing better. And I know that much about him. Okay, let's pray. Oh, what? Yes, he as in Mike. Okay, all right. Okay. Well, we've got a lot to pray about. And so let's pray. Our Father, we're bowing in your presence. You know these situations so much better than we do. You know all the needs that these people have, each one that we've talked about. We're asking you and we're lifting each one of these names up before you and asking you to be with them and help them, strengthen them and encourage them as they face these either treatments or surgery or just the ongoing rehabilitation that some are going through, and that you'll stand beside them and help them through that. Um, we're thankful for the good news that we do get and we do hear and we see that comes to us through your son Jesus, especially. but even the good news and joyful things that we have here on this earth. We're thankful for that. We're asking you, Lord, to be with us tonight as we open your word and guide us in our thoughts and in the study. Help us to realize that you're right here in our presence, and as we look to your word, that you're speaking to us. In Jesus' name, and amen. Okay, so we're going to dive right back into the parables again, and next week's going to be the last class because Jed has like 19 parables. He's going to have to go through next week to finish up. Not quite that many, but he does. There's several because you remember we did have a week that we skipped because of the storm. So just save all your tough questions for next week with Jed, and he's happy to entertain those for you. All right, tonight we're going to talk about, first of all, the unfinished tower and the rash attack. They're both found in Luke, the 14th chapter. They're back-to-back parables, and they're similar in their illustration, I will suggest to you. Luke chapter 14, beginning verse 28. It says, "For which of you intending to build a tower does not sit down first and count the cost, whether he has enough to finish it? Lest after he has laid the foundation and is not able to finish it, all who see begin to mock him, saying, 'This man began to build and was not able to finish.'" Then at verse 31, the rash attack. "Or what king going to make war against another king does not sit down first and consider whether he is able with 10,000 to meet him who comes against him with 20,000? Or else, while the other is still a great way off, he sends a delegation and asks conditions of peace." So first of all, let's just make sure we understand, again, the parable itself. So the first one, uh, man's going to build a tower. He gets started on it, gets working on it, and then doesn't finish the tower. And then he becomes a target of mockery or ridicule because he wasn't able to finish his tower. The second one, similar, but a king going to war, and he's going to go to war with his army of 10,000 people, and he should consider whether or not he has enough with his 10,000 to defeat this other army with their 20,000. And if he doesn't, then he'd be a wise man to try to find some way to broker some peace between the two nations or between the two kings. So pretty simple, pretty straightforward as far as the illustrations itself. So first of all, what do you see as far as a difference between these two? I mean, they're similar in their illustration, but what differences do you see? Okay, okay, all right, sure. That's a definitely. I mean, it's not of his choosing. It doesn't seem. The second one, the king. You're right. What else? Yes, sir. Okay, right. So the severity is the key. I mean, the first one is you're going to get laughed at, you're going to get mocked or ridiculed, but that's a whole lot different than going to go to war. And I'm now, I'm affecting my city or my nation, my army, maybe even myself. I maybe even lose my own life. So I'm in ridicule versus destruction, or ridicule versus possible death is the other thing that's seen in this clearly. Um, so let's look at the context. Let's go again. We've said all along the rule of context is that context rules. So, first of all, we have in chapter 14, verses 1 through 6, Jesus is at the house of one of the rulers of the Pharisees, and it is a Sabbath day, and he heals a man on that day, which, of course, for those of you who know or are Bible readers, Bible students, you know that every time that happened, what was the result? Yeah, okay. It was, oh no, the sky is falling. The sky is falling as far as the Pharisees were concerned. They thought Jesus was obliterating the Sabbath. And of course, they had this back and forth several times. Chapter 14, verses 7 through 14, Jesus does some specific teaching on humility and on the subject of doing good. Then in chapter 14, verses 15 to 24, the parable of the Great Supper, showing the great invitation of God. And when that invitation is spurned, as we looked at before, God's invitation gets larger and larger, opening up to anybody and everyone. And it seems probably talking about the introduction of the Gentiles, those wider circles as the kingdom expands. And then verse 25, seemingly in response to the previous, great multitudes of people begin to follow Jesus. He's attracting a huge crowd. And then in verses 26 and 27, I want you to look there with me. I should look there first since I'm not in the book of Luke. Chapter 14, verses 25 and 26. Um, where are we at here? Okay, now large crowds were going along with him, and he turned and he said to them, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father, mother, wife, children, brothers, sisters, yes, and even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not carry his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple." And then we have the parable itself, or the parables, these two parables that he tells. So, with that setup, what do you know? Because following the parable, there is an explanation statement that we'll look at verse 33 in a minute. But what do you know with that setup about these two parables? Okay, counting the cost of making this decision. Now, again, remember, huge numbers. I mean, Jesus is amassing a huge following of people. And so Jesus turns to them and doesn't say, "Oh boy, good, look at this big crowd." He said, in essence, "I want you to know what you're doing here. Okay? I want you to know what you're committing to. I want you to understand the decision you're making in following me or coming after me." And then he lays out these two parables. And as we said, um, maybe at a very simple level, we might say that both of these parables illustrate don't get involved in something that you cannot complete. Okay? I mean, they're just a very foundational aspect of that. Don't start building a tower if you don't have enough money to make sure you can build the whole tower. Okay. Um, how many houses do you figure there are in Ocala that they started painting, and they painted the front and they painted the sides, but they didn't finish painting the back? And maybe I'm talking to some tonight. I don't know, but there's a lot of people who do that. They get started on a job, right? And here's what we're going to do, and we're going to build this, or we're going to do this, and then we kind of fizzle out and don't ever get it done. So at one level, it could just be simply teaching us, don't get involved in something you can't complete. Uh, but look at what he's telling them here in verse 26 and 27, when he said, if you come after me and you don't hate your father, mother, wife, children, brothers, sisters, and even your own life, you cannot be my disciple. That's If you have a heading in your Bible, it probably says something to the effect of discipleship exacting. Okay? That these are the principles that it takes to be a disciple or a follower of Jesus Christ. So, so let's explore that. What in the world does he mean? You have to hate your father, mother, wife, children, sisters, brothers, even your own life to be his disciple. Okay? Um, that that certainly is true, but I mean, can we justify that with this language? I mean, you have to hate father, mother, sister, brother, and so on. I mean, is Dale, you right on that? Okay, yeah. Well, and that is what Dale you said. I mean, about being, yeah, about being putting God first, or not putting others before the Lord. Um, so, but this is pretty stark language, right? I mean, hate father, mother, sister, brother, even your own life. I mean, we don't usually talk like that. We don't usually think like that. That, well, I'm a Christian. I hate my wife. I'm a Christian. I hate my parents. Um, you know, that's not how we normally think or talk. Um, and then Jesus says the next part, verse 27, whoever does not carry his own cross or take up his cross and come after me can't be my disciple. What does he mean by that? Sacrifice? Okay. Sacrifice what? Okay. Yeah. And but remember now, what is a cross? I mean, what is a cross to these people? It's an instrument of death. Okay. It's not a piece of jewelry that they wear. Oh, isn't that pretty, that gold cross you're wearing on your necklace? Okay. Uh, that's not what it is. It's not something that adorned a building. But a cross was something they despised the cross. In fact, I was reading one time that there are some Greeks who would refuse to use the letter T or write the letter T because it reminded them of a cross, and they knew that was an instrument of death. Tau, the letter tau. Um, so that they wouldn't use that letter. I mean, that's how despised it was. So he says, you have to take up your cross and come and follow me if you want to be my disciple. Now, he's got a huge crowd of people, hundreds, just a second, hundreds of people or thousands of people who are following him. And his point is what? It's not all that you think. You're going to have to make some choices, some tough choices. Mike? Hmm. Right? Sure. Yeah. Yeah, and the point of this would be, if you're going to follow me, as he turns and looks at the crowd, if you're going to follow me, you might die. You have to pick up your cross and come follow me. Your instrument of death. You might die being a follower of Jesus. Now, we don't think about that too much here, right? I mean, there's not that much thought about it. Now, immediately after 9/11, and we were the infidels, and here were these people that were out to kill everybody who wasn't one of them. I mean, it did kind of bring it to light in the minds of lots of people. And so, if we're the infidel, we might die for our faith. Or the children that has happened to in school systems that are just horrific. If somebody puts a gun to your head, are you a believer in Jesus? Are you a Christian? And the person says yes, and the guy pulls the trigger. Um, we're not confronted with it that much. Certainly not like they were. In our culture here, we're not. But the point of, if you're going to follow Jesus, if I'm going to follow Jesus, there's a cost involved. And we don't think about that as often as we should, I'm persuaded. And Jesus is saying, you need to count the cost. And then he gives these two illustrations, one mockery, one severity, and I may even lose my life if I'm the king going, and I didn't really plan this battle out very well. Uh, and he lays this picture before them. Um, so, what are your thoughts? I mean, somebody else. What do you think? Yes, Edwin. Oh, Drew. Hmm. Right. I'm sure that's exactly correct, and that they were facing this because Jesus is putting on a miracle show, as far as some people were concerned, or Jesus was providing free lunch for some of them, and they must have thought along those lines. John chapter 6 very clearly illustrates that. Jesus said, "You didn't come to me because of who I am. You came because you got free lunch." I mean, that's what he tells them, and that's exactly right. He said now he starts telling them, "You're going to have to eat my flesh and drink my blood." And after they heard that, said a lot of people just said, "No, we ain't doing this. We didn't sign on for this," and they turn around, they leave. So that's exactly what goes on, Mike. Yeah. Okay. Right. Right. Well, and there are places in this world today that you do risk your life to become a Christian. Just so we're clear. I mean, we are fortunate. We're blessed here. Um, but there are places that if you stand up and say, "Yes, I'm a follower of Jesus Christ," you very well may lose your life before the day's out. So uh, Jesus is making this point here. You have to consider the cost. You have to think about what you're doing. Remember, again, you're talking about a mass of people who are now just globbing on and following Jesus, and he knows why they're coming. And he says, "Let me tell you what it's going to be." Now, um, this, I've had this same conversation the last couple of months with one of the brothers down in Carriacou. Um, After the storm, after Burl went through Carriacou and did so much devastation, the church down there, they started having people coming back to church, and they were assembling with them, they're worshiping with them, and the numbers started increasing as to what was going on. But the reason some were coming back, according to this brother that I've spoken with several times, is he said because the word got out that the church was helping people rebuild their house. Okay, so you know, so my house got leveled, and I didn't have insurance, and so hey, I used to go to that church, or I heard, so I'm a part of that church now, thinking maybe I'm going to get some money. I mean, that's probably what's going on similarly with Jesus. He's amassing a crowd. They've seen miracles. They've gotten free meals. They whatever it is, and Jesus says, "I want you to know you need to count the cost. It's not all you think it's going to be." So, are there people today who come to Christ, they're baptized, and we don't see them again? Yeah. That were the reasons. I don't know what the reasons are. I can't read their heart, and I want to teach as many as I can, baptize as many as I can, and bring them into Christ and help them along. But there are some people that say, "Oh, well, no, I didn't sign on for that." Okay, and they don't hang around. They don't stay. But here, look at verse 33. I didn't read that, but verse 33, he concludes by saying, "So then, none of you can be my none of you can be my disciple who does not first give up his own possession." Okay, so verse 33 has caused great consternation among many. After he's laid out the first, you have to hate father, mother, sister, brother, all them. You have to take up your cross. Now he says you have to give up. None of you can be my disciple who does not give up all of his own possessions. Um, Jesus didn't often teach that and say that, right? I mean, that sounds like you have to do what to become a follower of Jesus? You got to take a vow of poverty and give up everything that you own, okay? Every possession that you have. Yes, Jen. Well, absolutely. Yeah, there was a lot of confusion in that regard. So, but I mean, here's the reason why verse 33 causes so much consternation with people is that they say, "Well, Jesus didn't teach this everywhere. He didn't teach the same principle everywhere." I would suggest he did teach the same principle. He didn't use the same word. that to go back to what Delia said before of putting him first. Okay, to say all of your possessions, you have to give up all of your possessions. How many of y'all did that when you were baptized? Just get a show of hands. Okay, let me start counting. Gave up all your possessions to be a follower of Jesus. You did? Right. That's right. Right. Yeah, that's my point of saying that. I mean, if all of us took a vow of poverty, of all of us sold every possession that we had when we became a Christian, what's the problem with that? Now we got to find somewhere to get us food and somewhere to get us a place to stay and somewhere. I mean, so we're going to have to get it from somewhere else. I mean, the Lord never taught the idea that we have to take a vow of poverty to be a follower of His. Plenty of other scriptures talk about that. In fact, there are wealthy people who follow Jesus. That's not what's under consideration. But his point again is just to go to the at a basic level. Don't get involved in something you can't complete, but count the cost if you're going to be a follower of Jesus. Don't just do it for the fun of it. Oh well, 7 other people are getting baptized. I'll get baptized too, or whatever it is that you think at the time. True, right? Somebody said that once. Yeah, right. That's exactly right. Yeah, and I think it's set up by the statement when it says multitudes are following after him now, and Jesus knows why they are following him, and he says, in essence, I would think, although he could read their hearts, we might say that's great, but okay, and that's kind of what Jesus is saying: count the cost and consider these things. So, uh, all right, let's move on to the next one. The rich fool. Oh, so we can have riches, okay? So, but look at this: the rich fool in Luke chapter 12, verses 16 to 21. Um, but this seems to confirm maybe what we just said. So let's look at this and see. Then he, Jesus, spoke a parable to them, saying, the ground of a certain rich man yielded plentifully, and he thought within himself, saying, I like how it does this, by the way, in the parable. He thought within himself, and he said, what shall I do, since I have no room to store my crops? By the way, do you ever talk to yourself? Okay, they say it's not a problem until you answer yourself. Okay, if you answer yourself, then you might need to talk to somebody. Okay. Uh, anyway, that I digress. I'm sure. Verse 18. So he said, I will do this. I'll pull down my barns. I'll build greater, and there I'll store all my crops and my goods. And I'll say to my soul, soul, you have many goods laid up for many years. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said unto him, fool, this night your soul will be required of you. Then whose will those things be which you have provided? So is he who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. All right, so let me just quickly go through this. This context again is the request from someone in the crowd that Jesus would help and settle a matter for them. Uh, and then Jesus is the let me see. Yeah, this is another one of the parables. He's going to give us an introduction, and that is the request. So look at verse 13 in chapter 12. Let me get back there. Chapter 12 and verse 13. Now, someone in the crowd said unto him, Teacher, tell my brother to divide the family inheritance with me. Okay, first of all, is there anything wrong with that for the request the guy makes? No, I mean, no. It should have it divided like it's supposed to be divided. Is basically what he said. Talk to my brother. Tell him what he needs to do. But he said unto him, you there, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter over the two of you? So Jesus basically says, I'm not getting involved in this one. Okay, is kind of how he handles it. But he said unto them, beware and be on your guard against every form of greed, for not even not even when one is affluent does his life consist of his possession. And then he told them this parable that we just read. And then at the end of the parable, or after the parable, he has admonitions on not to worry. So that's the context of it. So let me ask a few things regarding the parable itself. Is there anything wrong with building a bigger barn for yourself and for your goods? I mean, there could be, okay, obviously, because this man is rebuked for it. But in and of itself, no, that's not wrong. For if you started out when you first got married and you lived in a one bedroom junior apartment, okay, and now you've been married for 10 or 20 or 30 years, you've been involved in your career, and you now decide you're going to buy a house, and you'd like to buy a 3 bedroom house, 2 bath, with a double car garage. I mean, is that wrong to do that, or to want to do that? I hope not. Okay. I mean, most all of us have basically tried to climb a ladder to some extent as far as finances go in our life. So that the man who says, "Well, I'll just tear down my barn and build a bigger barn," that's not wrong in and of itself, correct? Okay, so he can do that, and so is he condemning the idea of planning? I mean, the man says, "I've got a lot now that I can just kind of kick back in my 401. I've got I've got this or whatever, and I've got this nice nest egg, and I can just retire." Is there anything wrong with building a nest egg and retiring? Uh, okay, yeah. I mean, it could be. Again, it could be, but it's not necessarily wrong to build a nest egg and to retire. That's not what Jesus is condemning here. Okay, that's not what he's illustrating. So, who or what is Jesus illustrating here? What is he laying out? Okay, okay. So, yeah, and his first point is, I've got so much, I don't have to do anything. Because look at me, look at my bank account, or look at my big barns that are all full. And there is the impression I don't need God. I've got all that I need. And so I don't need anything else. I am rich, not rich toward God, but I'm rich. See, and I've got these big barns that are full. Everything's just wonderful. So, so he's addressing those people who are purely selfish in their accumulation of wealth, not somebody who is rich toward God or thinking of God, the one who has no thought of anyone else or anything else. So this kind of selfishness leads to the person who has now a self sufficiency. I don't need God. I've got everything that I need. See, I've got these big barns, they're all full, and I'm okay. Everything's fine. Okay. So, how does that play out in today's world? I mean, do we see this same thing? Okay. In what way? I mean, that was kind of a gimme question. Um, so, explain. How do we see that today? Do we see the big barns? Sure. I mean, if we lived in farming country, we might see that, right? Yes, Mickey. Right. Okay. All right. Yeah. I mean, naked I came from my mother's womb, naked I shall return. I mean, he was blessed financially, wonderfully, but you're right. That was not where his focus was or his trust. Um, what else? So you said the greed and so on. Rich. Yeah. That's right. Okay. Yeah. I did this and I did that and so on, rather than I've been blessed by God to have this or to have that. Um, and thinking again of being mine versus I'm just a steward of anything and everything that I have in this life. Um, but again, it boils down to the idea of the trust, and the person's trust is in their riches rather than in God. I've got all that I need because I got these big fat barns back here. I have everything I need. I mean, we can do the same thing today. I have X number of dollars in my retirement fund. I don't have to do. I can do whatever I want to now. I've got all that I need. And then 2 weeks later, what? You have a doctor's appointment. And he says, "Hey, we found this spot, and we're concerned about it." Okay. So all that money that you got, what's that going to do for your lifetime and your lifespan? I mean, it might stretch it out a little bit if you get the right doctors and the right help, but there's no guarantee, is it? No. I mean, and so he's addressing this idea that is so prevalent again in our society of the trusting in wealth and trusting in riches and not counting the cost. I mean, I'm counting, but I'm counting what I got right now. I'm looking at my bank account or my barn, and I'm counting, but not counting the cost in the big picture. All right, sure. Right. That's right. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, like what Richard said. I mean, look at what I did and what I've got, what I've accumulated, how hard I've worked, or whatever. Versus, yeah, I do have this, whatever it is, but it's just on loan. And God says, "Here, take care of this for a while, and let me see how well you do with it." And and that's what we don't measure. Sorry. That yeah, doing what we can. Again, that's that stewardship aspect of what I've been given to be able to use for other people and to help other people. Um, I mentioned on Sunday some things, and then even last night when the elders met again, we decided on some more to try to help some more folks. And this is you. I mean, everybody that puts a nickel in the contribution box back there, you're taking part in that. We sent, well, actually, it's being sent tomorrow, but $10,000 down to the Philippines. They have been inundated by what is it, 4 or 5 hurricanes in just a matter of a few weeks time, and I mean they have water up to the roofs. I've got pictures. If you go on to the Facebook page, you can see a few of those I put up today. Uh, and it is trying to share, trying to help, trying to do what we can with what we have, and that's part of this as well. Rather than to say I've got all this and look at what I've got, and so I'm fine. I don't need anything. See, I don't need God. In fact, um, okay, something else. Nope. All right, let's look at the last one. So that was the. Hey, I didn't even say that, but there you go. All right, so the last one is the unjust steward. We'll just take a minute on this. Luke chapter 16, verses 1 to 8. He, Jesus, also said to his disciples, there was a certain rich man who had a steward, and an accumulation, excuse me, an accusation was brought to him that this man was wasting his goods. So he called him in and he said to him, what is this that I hear about you? Give an accounting of your stewardship, for you can no longer be a steward. Then the steward said within himself, what shall I do? For my master is taking the stewardship away from me. I can't dig. I'm ashamed to beg. I've resolved what to do, that when I am put out of the stewardship, that they may receive me into their own houses. So he called every one of his master's debtors to him, and he said to the first one, how much do you owe my master? He said unto him, 100 measures of oil. So he said unto him, take your bill, sit down quickly, and write down 50. Then he said to another, and how much do you owe? And he said, 100 measures of wheat. And he said, take out your bill, write 80. So the master commanded the unjust steward, because he had dealt shrewdly, for the sons of this world are more shrewd in their generation than the sons of man. Now, what's your first thought about this parable? It sounds like he's a crook. Okay. What else strikes you? Does it seem like this would be a parable, a story that Jesus would use and commend? That does not seem that way. I mean, it seems just the opposite. This is a shyster, and he's taking advantage of his, first of all, his boss, and now he's really sticking it to his boss so he can have some fun or enjoy his life after he gets fired. I mean, isn't that what it seems like? Well, that's what it's like. No, it's not really. So the picture is here. This is a steward who's in charge of his master's possessions or his master's business, his books. Uh, the stewards back then would it's kind of like those who were tax collectors for the Romans, that you had to collect a certain amount. Okay, how much do you actually owe my master? Okay, well, my bill says I owe him 100 things of wheat. But why does my bill say that I owe him 100 measures of wheat? It could be, but what would be another reason why? Because of dishonor. The steward himself said, really, you only bought 75 measures of wheat, but you're going to pay back 100. Okay, so I'm going to get a cut out of this. And that's very well, I mean, that's is what happened in that day. There's a lot of testimony or evidence to verify that. Seems that's what Jesus is talking about. So it's not that this man is cheating his boss when he says, take the 100 and write down 50. The implication is he only owed 50 to begin with. Okay? He's not going to charge him interest, is what we would say today. So how much do you owe him, Jennings? Well, you owe him 100. No, you really only owe him 80, so write down 80. Okay? So now when I get fired from my job and I go talk to Jennings, how's he feel about me? Yeah, he likes me. Okay, I'm a nice guy. And so I need some help. Maybe he'll help me out. Okay? That's kind of the idea. But he says that he's shrewd in doing this. There's some wisdom that he used in bringing this about. Now, according to Deuteronomy, just so we're clear, Deuteronomy chapter 23 and verse 19, God had told them that the Jews were not to charge interest. So what you could not do and what you don't find is a lender who says Reuben borrowed 10 measures of wheat, and at the end of the year he has to pay back 12 measures of wheat. Because what does that say to anybody who reads it? He's charged me interest, okay? So to get around that, if you're a wise steward, all you do is you write the bill and say what? Huh? Okay, right. Yeah, you say at the end of the year you owe 12 measures of wheat, even though you really only bought 10. But I don't tip my hand that I've charged you interest in writing it that way, and that's what they would do. There are examples of that as well. So it may just be that he took and he cut out the interest, and he did that for what reason? What was the reason this guy did this? To win favors. Yeah, I mean, purely selfish. He wanted to get some benefit out of himself. But Jesus isn't commending selfishness. He's commending what? The shrewdness, that this man was a thinking man, okay? That he made preparation, or he counted the cost. If I'm going to lose my job, I'm going to have to find some way to get taken care of. So if I've got a friend here and a friend here and a friend here, maybe they'll help me and maybe they'll take care of me. So the context is that Jesus is telling various parables before then the parable itself, excuse me, then is the explanation of the parable or the follow-up. If you look with me at in chapter 16 again and drop down to verse number 9. It says, and I say unto you, make friends for yourselves by means of the wealth of unrighteousness, so then when it's all gone, they will receive you into their earthly dwelling. See, you're going to do yourself a favor if you're shrewd in how you act. So he says, verse 10, the one who is faithful in a very little thing is also faithful in much. And the one who is unrighteous in a very little thing is also unrighteous in much. Therefore, if you have not been faithful in the use of unrighteous wealth, who will entrust to you true wealth? And if you have not been faithful in the use of that which is another's, who will give you that which is your own? You see, you've lost your job. You got fired, as it said. No servant can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he'll be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. Now, I bet you the majority of us in here have heard that verse, and we haven't kept it in its context of all of this happening before. Most of us just heard that verse, okay? But, so what is this parable illustrating for us? Number one, I think at a very basic level, the steward has to give an account. He's called in to give an accounting. Hey, I heard some things about you that you've not been doing right. Now, give an accounting of what you owe, of my books. And he does. The second thing is that preparation should include the prudent use of resources. And then the third thing that we might learn from this as well is that the prudent person is going to be rewarded, or the shrewd person, if you will. He says to use unrighteous wealth or unrighteous mammon even to your own benefit. Can we do that today? Yeah, we should be able to do the same principle today. So does that mean that I should cheat my boss so that maybe when I get fired I do? No, that's not what that means. So I don't take it. Don't try to extrapolate too much out of the parable. But again, he's talking about a person who's made wise preparation for what's going to happen. He's getting fired. Uh-oh, I'm going to need somebody to take care of me. So what can I do to help prepare for that? I know what I'll do. I'll do this and this and this with the different ones who owe my master this money, and I'll make friends out of them. All right, let's see if you have a question or thought you want to say, somebody. And we have an accountant in the room tonight, and I said all of that with yeah. Well, right, but I mean, he's trying to make sure he can be cared for, and really that idea of counting the cost. I need to make sure that I'm going to be cared for. How do you do that? By putting God first, by doing the things the Lord wants you to do, the very things we've talked about tonight. Okay. Anything else? Thanks so much for being here. Next week, like